All right, I think we're ready to start. We're going to start the meeting at 3:02 right now.
All right, sorry, we're going by it right now.
All right, we started at 3:02. We're going to call the meeting to order. Let's do a roll call. Right.
Chantel Fossey,
Here.
Lindsay Hosler,
Here.
Summer Thomas,
Here.
Ian Whitney.
Here.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on to item number 3 for the board meeting agenda for November 14th, 2023. Let's do, I need an action to approve the agenda.
This is Chantal, I motion to approve.
This is Lindsay, I'll second. Okay, is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say yay. Are there any, yes? Okay, yay, yay, okay. Any nays? Okay, moving on to item number 4. Minutes from September 12th, 2023. For a second to review that, for a second, because I know it was emailed to everyone as well to look over. I will, we'll move action on this. So I would like to entertain a motion for approving the minutes for September 12th, 2023. This is Lindsay. I'll make a motion to approve.
After you wait, I'll second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say yay.
Yay.
Yay. Any nays? No. Okay, moving forward to item number 5. Do we have any people that would like to address the board, either through online or?
Nobody online? No. Nobody here.
Okay. Moving to item number 6, written communications, if any?
None.
Okay. Moving to item number 7, want to do that?
Sure, yeah, absolutely, my pleasure. So we have with us today a friend of the school. Miss Felicia Elias is the director of the charter school department at Fresno Unified. And so she is Fresno's assigned person to ensure oversight of the charters within the Fresno Unified District that are authorized by Fresno Unified. And so we work pretty closely with Felicia. We're in communication every week for something or another. She's out and visits the school, and we actually just spent the last week together. We were at the Charter School Development Center conference, and I was really happy that Felicia came down and joined that conference and partook of all the things that we were learning as well. So she's really a great partner for us, and glad to have her here. And so I wanted to introduce her, and I asked her, I think I asked you to be ready to say a few things, Felicia.
I'm very happy. Hello, everyone. Thank you for that very kind introduction. I appreciate it. This is my 3rd year in the role of being the representative for Fresno Unified as the superintendent's designee for all matters charter. I've enjoyed it thoroughly, and especially getting to know all the different schools. Endeavor has always been a wonderful place for me, not only because of what you do, but I love it so close to home. I love it. It's just down the block, so it's a great time. Every time I come here, it's great fun. What I love about learning about your school is all of the things that you do for your students and the personalized approach that this type of structure has for our charter schools. I am also a former charter parent. My daughter attended a charter school in high school, but not middle school and primary elementary school. She was in public school, and it was her choice to go to charter, and it was a great experience. So I kind of have both worlds in my mind, and I just love coming out to Endeavor. You guys do such great things for kids. And one of the goals of my personal goal has been to attend more board meetings this year. And with our new restructure, I have an additional administrator in our office this year to help us with that. So I'm able to get out more. So I'm very happy to be here. You're my fifth meeting today.
Oh, wow.
Today, sorry. I'm holding up very well.
Great.
Oh, that's so silly. Five meetings this year,
All right,
so happy to be here.
that's great. Thank you so much. Awesome.
Moving on to item number 8, warrant reports. Or thoughts?
Good.
Okay, sure. I'm looking through these. I see there's 20 pages. It goes from September 7th through November 5th. I didn't see it, usually I highlight something that's unusual or large or than not the regular stuff we normally go through. There really isn't anything too unusual there, so probably better just to answer any questions you might have. When we look at the format, we have a lot of detail, and I think that, and tell me if I'm wrong, but I think all that detail is an excellent thing to have. Because you go, what is that? And then you look and you can see the comment. And so usually that answers the question, but if not, we're always ready. Everyone is, Mike, Eric, myself, we got, great, so that we can answer any questions we might, if you have any questions particular to what those are. Sometimes we'll have a reimbursement to a board member, and then we'll talk about people just for that little trial reimbursement, but there's nothing like that I see this time.
So real quick, I'm just going to just review a little bit of the information that's here.
Sure.
Because it's going to stand in contrast to something we're going to talk about later.
Right.
So this warrant report, just as a reminder, is after the fact. We're doing business, we're buying goods and services, we go through our approval process. And part of the approval process is this stage where it comes to you and you see everything. So on this report, you'll see who the check's being made to on the left, in that big middle kind of left-hand column. You'll see in the right square in the middle, the fund object, because we only have 3 money sources, and the 3 money sources are the 3 schools. And everything that we purchase is allocated proportionally to which students are getting the benefit. If it's only for Endeavor, then you'll only see the Endeavor fund number there. If it's proportional, then you'll see that number split up. So, for instance, the very first thing you see is a reimbursement for mileage from Melissa Culper. You'll see that that's allocated 3 ways. The 100 number is Mountain Home, the 109 fund number is Glacier, and the 169 fund number is Endeavor. So everybody see that? Is that you following? So you can see how that's who's paying for it, and it gives you some sense of the proportionality of what the purchase is. And then you see, in the comment, you see a descriptor, so that it's clear. And the idea that we designed this report with you folks in mind, if it was just Jody and I and our back office people looking at it, it wouldn't look this way, but we're trying to make sure that it is very clearly evident of what's being purchased, how much, where it's going, and what it was for. So the comment describes all of that, and then you see the amount on the far right. I point that out just for your own reminder and as you read these, but it's also going to stand in contrast to something I'm going to show you during my report time.
And as you know, we allocate, generally speaking, by the ADA of each school, so you can have
Right.
all 3 schools, the total ADA of 3 schools, and then they're prorated by the ADA by school.
Right.
That's most of those shared costs. Sometimes if it's just an Oak Ridge or just if it's Oak Ridge, it'll be split just between those 2 schools. If it's Endeavor, it's 100% for just Endeavor. But if it's a shared cost, it's generally going to be the 3-way split based on ADA.
Guys, if you don't hear any questions, you'll say.
Here are these questions. Any questions at all? So I will entertain a motion to approve the warrant reports for 9/7/23 to November 5th, 2023.
Mr. Chantel, motion to approve.
You make the second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, please say yay. Yay. Are there any nays? Okay, moving to item number 9.
So, guess that could be Jody or myself. We have a,
You can share first if you like.
we have a special request for use of the school credit card. And this board has approved a credit card policy in the past. You may recall, it was just last year. One of the provisions in the credit card policy is that it would not be used for ongoing rental expenses, whatever it may be. It was really largely intended for travel and things like that. That's needed.
One-off expenses.
One-off expenses and not going to be used to set up ongoing rental costs. However, we've had a request, because of doing business with this particular vendor, which happens to be Metalmark Climbing Gym. We have a climbing team, and this is the season, and they're going to be there climbing on a regular basis and also doing tournaments there. And so Metalmark, the only real way to do business with Metalmark, according to them, is, with a credit card. So this has been a request from a teacher. It's coming to you because it's specifically outside of what our policy allows. You have the authority to approve, to do with it what you wish, but that's what that is. You do have an email attached. It gives you, this is the teacher who was requesting, and I asked her for what we could expect the monthly cost to be. So up at the top, she did the homework and worked with Metalmark. This is for 20 students on the climbing team, which is what a full team is. Would be expecting $1,364 dollars a month to be billed on the card. That team.
So it's recurring, and it'll obviously occur during the season, so I think we should probably bring this to the board because it does seem like one of those things that's gonna happen in month after month, or at least, what? How many?
For some number of months.
Six-ish?
What is, yeah.
I think the last, I think at least April or May, can't remember when the last.
Yeah, so
I
that's-
know it was
yeah, about
April
6
at least.
Right.
I know they are gonna be individual, if there's more or less, if they're gonna be trued up, so it's not like it's just, here's a charge. So it's a little different than a rental, in that sense, that it's not just worth,
It's per the kids that are actually using it.
Yeah, so it's just basically paying their monthly
Right.
fee if they were a member there, but they're not charging us the initiation fees that charges. And then I think last year they did it as a lump sum because they wanted that money all up front. Well, then a few of the climbers that decided a month or two into it, they didn't get reimbursed for that.
Right.
So this would be saving money in a sense, because now if somebody does happen to not go, then they can just drop that
Right.
off the bill and they don't have to pay.
Right.
Instead of paying $1,300 up front.
Yeah, I just want to I'm sure that not consistently do you get 20 children, 20 climbers per month. You might have less. Would you possibly be getting more at times?
No,
The
we
only
just
thing
talked,
go ahead.
I just talked with Brooke, she was just asking about that, because there's been a sign up of 23, and it said, well, the team's 20, and we need a number, so let's just stick with that, so that's, yeah,
That's
so
what
it'll be
they're
20
doing right
students.
now.
Right.
Would you say that to have some flexibility for the board to know there's some flexibility that 20, it could possibly be maybe 25 at times, so then that amount will then adjust. So then we need to, as a board, to be aware that that amount could possibly just increase based upon interest of the child.
If they change their fees, or if there's additional children, then, right, that would increase. So the number you have here is what a full team would be, 20 students on their current fee basis.
Right, plus extra.
but it will be an actual accounting rather than.
Right.
Right.
That's what I'm-
Yeah, and that would be more efficient.
Yeah, it's actual based on.
And actually count them over time, so
Right.
they know it's 18 years. It's gonna be trued up, so last time it was a little clunky, it was the first year we did it too. So that's why it's not necessarily like a rental, it's not a rental, it's not recurring in the same sense as something else where you say, okay, it's, $1,000 a month and it just goes on for 3 years, that's not what this is, but it's close enough, we thought we'd bring it just to make sure specifically the board was either okay or does not like.
I assume there's,
If you'd like to keep paying payments, that's fine.
but I assume there's no staff concerns with carrying the expense on the credit card. There's no.
Not fine.
No, we pay that bill every month, full bill.
Right, there'll be, yeah, it's a full the full.
I assume it'll be reassessed every year, that it's not gonna be carried, not gonna be.
That's correct.
Membership.
This is a fixed.
Yeah, in fact-
That's correct.
In fact, it doesn't state it this way in the agenda, but perhaps whoever moves on this, say for this school year,
Yeah, it doesn't go into enough.
for 23-24 school year.
It's approximately 6 months in this school year. It'll be done by May, whenever that ending is.
Yeah, when the season ends. Yeah, when the season ends.
When the season ends this year.
All right, I would like to entertain a motion for approval for the WSCS credit card to be paid recurring monthly bill for Metal Mark Climbing Gym for this 2023-2024 school year during this season of climbing.
Ian, when you so moved.
This is until this.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say yay. Yay. Are there any nays?
Can we pause a moment for secretary to be able to get the wording about this with this school year?
Yeah, for the 23-24 school year for the season of the climbing program.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to item number 10, for resolution 2023-2024 for additional allocation to board designated reserve funds.
Jody?
I will take that. Okay, let me share my screen. Okay, and this is not in the packet, although we can send it to you. I thought it was, but you do have the resolution. But this is an explanation of what the resolution is about. So, as we accumulate, we have the unaudited actuals and we have, they're not finalized around the audit of the unaudited actuals, and we'll have the final number as of December 15. But at this point, we know enough from the unaudited actuals what our accumulated equity is in each of the schools, or our fund balance. And so as the board has done in the past, we try to make sure that the amount of fund balance that we have, the reserve, the equity that we've accumulated is put into, we decide what it's going to be used for. So we're putting that aside into designated reserves that the board picks. And so they're designated only in as much as the board can designate or undesignate them. It's not a legal requirement that these are not legally required to use. These are fiscally responsible ways of having reserves set aside. So they take the total amount of the fund balance that we have accumulated over time, and then we say this much is for this and so forth. We, how much we assume, or we're hoping that this will be utilized in the future if, given that things go according to plan. Okay, so if we look up here on this, let me enlarge that a little bit. And let's just get this in detail, so I don't want to make sure this is understood pretty well here. Okay. Move it down a little bit. Okay, so there, I don't know where they moved that.
What was that?
Just trying to make that, I guess that one part is just gonna stay there, but that's okay, it's close enough. So the end column is just the accumulation of the three, so it's WSCS, total figures, okay? All right, so the current facilities, so there are three different total types of reserves. So three are, the first one is current facilities acquisition or capital projects. So we know that Endeavor is looking for a new property. And so we're trying to accumulate money to put aside to that. We had a couple of months ago, I forgot exactly when that was, but recently, we had guys from Charter School Capital come in and discuss that in detail. But, so what we're also doing is gonna have a down payment, an amount of money that will be utilized for that end. So, in the past, we had, let me look at it here, it's a little different, see here. We had $1 million set aside, $200,000 set aside for Endeavor. And that's because Endeavor is still in its early stages, right? It's only 4 years old. So it doesn't have the same accumulation as another school does. But we're trying to put aside money. Now this year, we want to add another $800,000 to that to make it $1 million of a designated reserve. Like I say, it's designated reserve. It's called that because the board gets to designate that. It's not a required legal reserve in the same sense that.
But it
we have-
expresses to anybody who's interested, the board's will and intent with this reserve money.
And I keep emphasizing that because the board can then change that at will. In the future, now that we don't want to do that, we want to change it or whatever. So that's what this resolution is, if you decide that that's what you want to do. So Endeavor would now have $1 million rather than 200,000. And then for economic uncertainties, and we've just talked about economic uncertainties in the past, that is a specific category of reserve, it's a type. And that's for things like shortfalls, suddenly the state budget is not very good, we get less ADA, money per ADA. They decide to do deferrals again like they did a couple of years ago, we lose cash flow, and now we have to have a bunch of cash reserve carry us through some months of that. And so economic uncertainties, those things, suddenly some economic issue that comes up and causes economic consequence to us, or whatever it might be. Our expenses suddenly get very high for some unexpected reason. So in this case, let me just go through, those are the two types that I'm saying we had. So let's go back to the facilities acquisition. I want to go through all three schools again, and then we'll go down to economic uncertainties again. So current facilities and acquisition costs. Mountain Home and Glacier up in Elkers also have costs that they are expected costs in relationship to these capital projects. So we're putting money aside there as well. Now, Mountain Home and Glacier both have been around quite a bit longer, so we have a little more to put aside. And so that's why it looks a little bit different. But you'll see at the bottom that the total amounts that we're talking about after we agree, if we do, is, let me go to So, yeah. So let's start with Mountain Home. So if Mountain Home has $2,091,000 in those reserves, Glacier has 686,000, and then Endeavor has 1.6 million. Okay, and so if we decide, and after we go through the resolution, 79% of the total reserves available would be 1.7 million in facilities acquisition for Mountain Home. Glacier would have 425,000. Endeavor would have 1 million. Okay, for Mountain Home that's 79%. For Glacier it's 41%, and for Endeavor it's 28% of their total of their reserves. Okay, so now for economic uncertainties. 325,000 for Mountain Home is 15%. They all come out to 15%, by the way. That's you can see that little spoiler alert. 155,000 for 15% and 550 in Endeavor for 15%. That leaves an unassigned, unappropriated amount of 3% for Mountain Home, 10% for Glacier, and 2% for Endeavor. So the idea here is this money, the unappropriated and the economic uncertainties, like here it's 18%, here it's 25 accumulated between the two, and this is 17. That's money that's not, that can be used, it's sort of fungible, right? So the amount that could be used, if something comes up, you have that much money set aside for shortfalls or whatever. So the real thing that we're sort of focused on here is the capital projects amount. And again, if something comes up and we can't afford to hold that all in reserve, then we would just change it. It's okay, that we can't really afford that. But what we're trying to say here is we have capital projects, that's an important thing. And we want to keep saving money, so next year we put some more money aside.
Let me just say,
Sure.
we get no special funding for any capital projects.
Right.
We get no special funding for facilities. We are on our own through our regular LCFS dollars. That is, as we've said before, as we happily complain, different than every other single public school, other than non-classroom based charters. There's facility money for everybody else. We don't get it, so we have to pay for whatever we do out of our LCFS. So that's what we're doing is in Mountain Home, we have a significant remodeling expansion that we need to be doing, and we're in the process of fighting through planning and all of that at this very moment. We know here at Endeavor, we must have forecast of a new greater facility to serve our needs. So that's what we're trying to do, is we're saving our ducats to be able to make that move in the future.
I noticed, is there a, I guess, a max on what you can, how much you can put into that fund? And I know that each portion of each title is that you have to have a certain percentage, you know, so is there a certain max or average that you're supposed to have, and then some that maybe, because you don't want to, you know, as far as if it gets too high, then it's, you know, is there a balance?
Well, it shouldn't be higher than what your expectation is of the actual cost. So, and none of these are at this point at higher than that. So here we have what, $2 million here, 2,125,000 is for these two schools at the one facility. So that's how much that is. We expect that Endeavor is going to be somewhere in the 4 or 5 million or higher range as the ultimate cost of the facility. Now we're looking at a financing arrangement that we won't have to pay for all of that up front. But of course, the more we pay for it, the less it'll cost them, you know, in lease payments in the long run.
It really isn't, there's no really necessarily a max if the thing.
It's got to be, yeah, it's got to make sense to the total reserves. Absolutely. So you want to keep the unappropriated amount and the uncertainties amount big enough that you feel comfortable that you can absorb that if something goes south.
When you have significant reserves, it is considered generally good practice to have those be designated or the board to express intent. Contrary to just having massive amounts of reserve that have not been set towards a proposed future use.
Right, because we're trying to show what is the point of what we're doing. So in each year, we're spending so much on expenses and we're reserving so much. We're having it's not a net profit, but that would be the idea of a for profit. But it's the amount above your expenses that are remaining from that year, right? So why are you accruing that is the question, right?
So we're doing a better job, we're doing a really great job, not better, but really great job of reducing expenses. And that's why we have the funds that we do have to be able to allocate and to be able to designate that. Is that why, that's what this money is for, correct?
It's because the board has a priority for the facilities that we need. And so when we, from our incoming apportionment, we know we have these facility needs, so the board is creating budgets that reflect that priority of future facility.
And as Mike said,
This was my first time seeing that.
No, this is great.
That's why we're making
That's
sure
why
processing all that.
we want to have a really big
Super great
conversation.
question.
That's why this comes up. We've done it the last several years.
Yeah.
And so
Super great question.
we're making sure that that's understood, that this is sort of the roadmap. This is showing us what's important to us. What are we doing here? Now, remember, we also did raises over the last couple of years of 5% per year. So we got to make sure that we're keeping those things happening. We look at how much inflation, we know inflation was running at 7, now it's more like 3, and you know, it's hopping around, but it's been expensive. And so what this does is we say, given that in each budget year, we're covering our costs appropriately, what's the excess beyond those normal operational costs? And if we're going to keep that, what are we keeping it for? One of the big issues is always economic uncertainties. As you recall, a couple of years ago, even when Endeavor, the first year Endeavor was around, Endeavor lost $550,000 from not getting their growth, their ADA enrollment, the increase over the prior year. They didn't get paid for that because of this budget cute little thing they did right at the end. There was a lawsuit. The lawsuit didn't go well, didn't win. So we never argued. It doesn't look like we're going to get it back. There was also an appeal of that lawsuit because all the NCB schools had a class action sort of suit. And so far it has not prevailed. So it doesn't look like that's happening, but that was unexpected. That happened in August and we had already enrolled everybody and hired up for that. And then the budget came to the legislature and they said, oh, by the way, only non-classroom based schools don't get funded for the difference between their current enrollment and their prior year enrollment. No reason for that other than they just said it. Okay, so we were surprised. we had the option of letting all those enrolled kids go, and we didn't do that. That would be unethical in our opinion, because they already are enrolled. And so we just absorbed the cost of those things. So that's about an uncertainty that no one could have guessed was coming down the pike at that point.
Thank
And
you.
it did.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
That makes all sense now.
Okay, yeah, so that's why we do this. It's sort of just to say there are two biggies, our economic uncertainties and facilities.
Okay.
Those are it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so there's a resolution. This is just the background, just to support the concepts, but if you don't mind, I'll just read the resolution out loud and we can talk about that. And it does have the reasoning behind it. And so this serves, it's not a policy per se, but it's the board's thinking, if you agree that that's how this would go. So I'll just read it. Whereas the Western Ontario Charter Schools Board of Directors desires to maintain a sound fiscal status for the organization now and in the future, and to prepare for planned as well as unexpected costs, and whereas diligently planning for future costs and setting aside funds for such costs is a prudent method for maintaining the organization's fiscal strength, and whereas the 2022-23 school year unaudited actual financial reports have been prepared and analyzed for the purpose of ascertaining the appropriate amounts of various reserves that should be considered by the board for adjustments based upon these financial results and balances. And whereas there have been multiple financial hardships, including the COVID pandemic, retroactively implemented funding reductions, one I just mentioned, cash deferrals, and significant legislative changes that have affected WSCS operations over the last few years. And whereas inflation and recession are being forecast by the governor and other authorities, possibly bringing another round of drastic funding reductions and or cash deferrals. And whereas as a result, each of the schools has an urgent need to prepare by setting aside additional funds for these economic uncertainties. And whereas each of our schools also has an urgent need for new or improved facilities and capital projects which arise from the implementation of our educational model, which includes seat-based instruction. So the point of that is that there are virtual schools. We are not a virtual school. So a lot of times NCB schools are considered, well, you're not classroom based, so how can we have, they think we don't have classes. And so therefore, that's why we don't get funding for those classes, those facilities, brick and mortar facilities. What some call a hybrid and all those different words and names for it, but we need facility. Okay, I'm just making that point. And as a result of restrictions placed upon our schools by being designated as classroom-based education code and therefore ineligible for various forms of facilities, funding available from the state of California to other public schools, our schools have no choice but to utilize funding received from local control funding formula and other general fund revenue sources to pay for these costs that might ordinarily be used for other instruction-related services. And furthermore, as a result of the size of these costs, to save these funds over a multi-year period of time in order to ultimately meet required funds. Okay, so I think that encapsulates a lot of detail, but that's pretty much the point. And then, so now therefore be resolved that the board has designated the following amounts as reasonable discretionary reserves to be considered as set aside for the following purposes. So first bullet point, each of the schools will add additional reserves for economic uncertainties as follows. Mountain Home School Charter adding $230,000 to the previous amount of $95,000 for a new total of $325,000. Glacier High School Charter adding $105,000 to the previous amount of $50,000 for a new total of $155,000. Endeavor Charter School adding $400,000 to the previous amount of $150,000 for a new total of $550,000. These new discretionary reserve set-asides will bring the total amount of reserves for economic uncertainties to approximately 15% of the 22-23 total expenditures. Up on my sheet there, that bottom number is last year's or 2023's expenditures for each of the schools. That's how you get the reserve percentages. That's how it's defined. And then the second bullet point, each of the schools will add additional reserves for facilities, acquisition, and or capital projects as follows. Mountain Home School Charter adding $700,000 to the previous amount of $1 million for a new total of $1.7 million. Glacier High School Charter adding $225,000 to the previous amount of $200,000 for a new total of $425,000. Endeavor Charter School adding $800,000 to the previous amount of $200,000 for a new total of $1 million. These designations are at the board's discretion and are not in response to any particular legal requirement or regulation, and as such may be amended, canceled, or superseded as conditions warrant, and the board determines at any time. And then pass the topic if in this resolution. The other, and the underlying reason also is that President Unified or, you know, your Yosemite Unified might ask what.
Why do you have these big reserves? What are you doing?
We can explain, express the board's will that that's what they're for.
So what we will do is do a roll.
Yeah,
Do a
a
roll.
motion.
We'll entertain a motion for approval for the approval of resolution 2023-2024 for additional allocation to board designated reserve funds. Is there a first?
This is Chantal.
This is Lindsay, I'll second.
Is there any discussion? Okay, we will do a roll call, and because of it being a resolution, we'll do a roll call. So Dan?
Chantel, here. Lindsay,
Yes?
Summer,
Here? Yes?
yes, sorry. There's 4 yes.
Put my name down first and then I can follow it.
Alphabetical, sorry.
That's the roll call.
Okay. All right, moving to item number 11, approval for hiring new staff. Mr. Cox?
So, we hired a number of people. Last board meeting, we introduced you to Nicholas Kettleton, but we had hired him too close to the board meeting and he didn't get on the agenda for approval. We introduced him to you. He's our new safety officer here. And then for Mountain Home, we had an open position, a single teacher open position. And we hired a retired teaching couple who were so glad. So we've hired Michael DeCarly and Sandra DeCarly. They did their career, for your edification, Felicia, at Manchester Gate. Wonderful folks. And so they are now obviously retirees, but working part-time together, a full teacher for Mountain Home, and they are just great, just dynamite. So I bring those 3 folks to you for your approval as new Western Sierra Charter School employees.
Okay. I will entertain a motion for approval for hiring new staff, Nicholas Kettleton, Michael DeCarly, and Sandra DeCarly.
Ian Whitney, so moved.
This is Lindsay, I'll second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say yay.
Yay.
Are there any nays? Moving to item number 12, approval of job description for HR coordinator and executive assistant. Fox.
So at the conclusion of last school year in our June meeting, you, the board, may recall that you were giving me direction to look for 2 things in general. One was to look for support and assistance in my work as executive director, to find somebody to help with the clerical administration of that work. And also, and perhaps more importantly, you directed me to look into research human resource support in regards to human resource legalities and third-party vendor supports, or the consideration of hiring an HR human resource person. And so I have been diligently pursuing those things, and I am in 100% agreement with the board in our need for those things. In fact, in the last 2 conferences that I attended, the A+ conference and the CSDC conference, I spent virtually all of my breakout sessions in HR related topics. And also talking with other colleagues about other schools and other organizations that have their own in-house HR coordinator or officer. And so what's before you here is a job description that is sort of a mashup hybrid of executive assistant and HR. And probably proportionally, it's like 1/3 executive assistant and 2/3 HR, something like that. But so the job description here is gleaned from a variety of others that I did in my research for both executive assistant and HR. And we would like your approval to make it an official job description. I have flown the position out there, so out on Midjoin right now is essentially what this position represents. So, any questions on that? Excuse me.
I think it's a really good job description based upon both your knowing what your tasks, some of your tasks are, and also what HR is as well. I think it's a good decision.
Yeah, thanks for the idea.
I will entertain a motion for approval to run the job posting of assistant to executive director and human resource coordinator. Is there a first?
This is Lindsay. I'll make a motion to approve.
Second,
This is Chantel.
is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say yay. Yay. Are there any nays? Okay, moving on to item number 13, reports. President Staff Liaison Grace.
All right, couple staff updates to start off with, and then I have Lindsay's updates. We get some maybe a little bit later. So the first one is that we had our second month, of the Explorer traits. And so we had 5 students recognized for the trait of being responsible explorers. So we have Matthias, Riley, Drake, Lily, and John. Sorry, jumping way ahead. Who were all nominated, and then a committee selected them as students that best represent this trait. We also had the ROV mobile unit come out, and Patrick shared experiences in the real world, how different ROVs are used in different situations, and then got to meet with each of the ROV teams and give them some tips and tricks on their specific ROV that they're working with.
So, do you know anything about the ROV mobile unit, Grace? Like,
Only what Renee shared,
Yeah,
that little bit that Renee shared with the air probably knows a lot more.
So this is a kind of a well-known person in the underwater robotics field, and so he's kind of traveling the country and is in our area.
Wow.
And so the organization that we work with, MADE, which does the Marine Advanced Technology and Education, reached out to any schools that might be interested, and Renee reached out to them and arranged to have him come and talk to them about like what he does in his role, what he has done in his life, and also I believe they had a mobile unit where they had some actual things for them to see. Yeah.
That's amazing, that's awesome.
really cool.
That is very cool.
So yesterday was, we'll talk a little bit more about Spirit Week this week, but also
Entrance to the haunted house.
This shop, does Edgar Allan Poe Day every year and dresses very well for the part, and it has become one of the highlights of our English program. So Spirit Week was kicked off yesterday. So yesterday was Pajama Day. So this is a hero there on the left with one of our students dressed up. And then the other two on the right are some of the teachers today modeling their crazy hair day. So day 2, I think, tomorrow is dressed like a teacher day. As far as our professional development, our PLCs are very well received by teachers. It's a good time for collaboration and also a great way to build community. So these are kind of general, like a space for us to discuss, needs and, kind of launching into new areas and programs and kind of hash out some of the details there and opportunity for us to collaborate, and then also, if there's anything that comes up that we want to bring up to the admin level, then that's a good space to do that as well. We also have our curriculum professional development, so high school's working to add elective offerings, but also to replace some of the out-of-date materials. This month specifically, we're looking at some different options. Pacemakers and AGS have been our remedial curriculums, and they are no longer in print. So we're looking for a good option that works with our, like a text-based book format. There's a lot of online stuff, but finding good textbook-based ones is a little bit difficult to find. TK through 8 is reviewing some different curriculums that were piloted this year, so that was their focus this month. And then technology this year, Melissa gave both TK through 8 and high school some different trainings on some apps to help support learning, specifically in the area of kind of embedding videos in teaching, but then also little shortcuts to using the keystrokes on your computer and little apps that help kind of streamline things. And, yep, then we get to the principles update. That's correct.
Okay, Mr. Slows? For the openers. Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Let me share my screen.
Oh, sorry, John, give me 1 second. Okay.
For sharing it.
That is my bad. Okay, you should be able to share now.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. Okay. So, yeah, in my report, I'm gonna go over Spirit Week, the trip to the Reagan Library with Glacier High and Endeavor. Our enrichment classes are wrapping up, and then our new meeting format for our staff meetings. So we had a Spirit Week where we had like Mustache Day and Dress Like an Old Person Day and a Pajama Day. Then so there was a lot of participation during the lunchtime. We would have activities, little competitions outside. So here are some of the students dressed up what they think is an old person, which is pretty good. Had a superhero day, and then like crazy hat, crazy sock, just about every crazy kind of thing you could think about. So so that was Spirit Week was very successful and a lot of fun and a lot of participation. So then Glacier and Endeavor went to the Reagan Library, and so I don't really know anything about, but Mrs. Friesen wanted me to share these pictures with you. So here are some of the pictures with Endeavor and Glacier students. And so it looks like this. So this is the leadership of the two schools' leadership students, and it looked like a very successful time. So our enrichment classes are wrapping up. So this week, and here are, so the classes have been a lot of fun. So for instance, I teach first and second grade variety. we made some changes with that schedule, like before I would just teach first grade science and second grade science, so now we've combined them. Instead of being with them for an hour and 15 minutes, I'm with them for 2.5 hours. And I take them to Mrs. Dent's music, Mr. DeCarly's been doing PE with us. And so, so we have longer time with the younger students, so that's been a great, I've gotten to know them better and spending more time with them. So this is the 6th and 7th grade creative problem solving, oops, let me go back, with Mrs. Huddlebrick, one of our adjunct teachers. And then this is 6th and 7th grade, or 6th through 8th grade drawing with Mrs. Gross. So like I said, the enrichment classes are wrapping up this week. And then in a couple weeks, instead of classes, we'll have the kids gift workshop where the kids get to do 2 surprise gifts for parents or grandparents. And so they come in and it's all the teachers are there. It's very festive, and they make 2 very crafty gifts and wrap them. And then finally, Tuesday we have our staff meeting, so we're able to wear pajamas on our staff meetings now. This, I'm kidding, this is from Spirit Week, but we started a new format with our staff meetings. They used to be on Fridays, so we switched them to Tuesdays now. And the format, we will have some professional development. So last week we had the online resource coordinators from Madera County come up, and 2 wonderful ladies run that. And so all the online resources available to us, and also, when they can bring items up to us, like if we want to borrow a skeleton from them, they will come up once a week and bring models or any kind of resource you can think of. And so that was our professional development that day. And now we're pushing that out to our families, getting our families to use the Madera County website with lots of free resources. Like National Geographic online, Tumble books. So there's very good resources on that. And then we have site specific, like Mountain Home, we meet. We usually have a large group meeting with everyone, all staff, and then we will do, like we've done, working on fire drills, and so it gives us the time to really have professional development, do staff meetings just with our side or the whole group, and then work on things important like campus safety. And so just from my perspective, I feel like that kind of, instead of having classes that day, the other options is the students have PE with Mr. DeCarly at Camp Boker. So they still have an option to do things, but then it gives us, our campus is closed, and it gives us time to do professional development and to have staff meetings. So from my perspective, it's been great. So, okay.
John, I just want to say that I think the whole Big Lebowski thing there is really great. You definitely you pull it off really well, actually.
Well, I was thinking every Friday, for Casual Friday, we could do that. So.
Thank you, John. Appreciate that. Great reports. Mr. Cox for Executive Director's report.
Yeah, thank you. So I put a few things down there on the agenda. I mentioned there's 3 annual statewide charter association conferences: A+, CSDC, and CCSA, California Charter Schools Association, which happens usually in spring. A+ and CSDC this year were like right back to back. We went to A+ in October, and then 2 weeks later, we had CSDC. So that was a little bit of a jam to have those meetings so close together, but they're always very, very helpful. A+ is an association of other non-classroom based charter schools. So it's very the A+ conference and their work is the closest thing to being specific to the kind of work that we do and the issues that we have. So there's a lot of shared learning and support because it's the most closely aligned programmatically to what we're about. CSDC, the Charter Schools Development Center, is really the go-to for policy development. Eric Premack, who is the founder of CSDC, was part of writing California's charter law 30 years ago. And so he's a super resource, and his whole team and all the people they bring. So that conference is a larger conference. Again, it's statewide, so you have schools coming from around the state attending, and some really top-notch folks presenting topics and issues in sessions that are of the moment, really concerns and fresh on legal updates and what we're facing and what we need to be responding to. So super, super helpful. And again, I mentioned Felicia was there too, and that was really great. Got to spend a little bit of time together and attended some of the same sessions. And so that was good. And as I shared with you, both A+ and CSDC, for me personally, I was largely running down the human resource track, gaining knowledge and insight around those things. We already mentioned, we're just yesterday got posted the new human resource executive assistant position, and we'll see who applies. I'm excited about the potential. The potential is really wonderful. Will be a super asset, whoever that person is, in regards to helping us really move our human resource shop forward, and helping put it on really, solid ground going forward. So I'm excited about that. It's a new requirement that charter school boards go through Brown Act training. You're familiar with the term. We follow the Brown Act, which is a California law that governs governing boards and how they meet and how they deliberate. And really the purpose of the Brown Act is that government meetings are intended to be open and transparent and available to the public. That's what Brown Act rules are all about. And we are, as a public school, 3 public schools, we are under the provisions of the Brown Act, and there's a new law that requires that boards be trained in the Brown Act. And so you see a link there. I will be forwarding you, in fact, you might have already be receiving one in your email already. There is an online training, which is a number of video modules that will take about an hour and a half to go through, that go through the various elements of the Brown Act that you will be able to do on your own at your leisure from your computer. And so I'm asking, and those should be in your email now, I've set this up. This training is coming through CSDC, Charter School Development Center. They're the ones who put the training together. And again, it should be in your email already as of today for you to be able to click on that link, get into the site, and then you'll see these various Brown Act modules. And again, the total of them is probably about an hour and a half of viewing. So I would like to ask of you, good people, that between now and the January meeting that you're able to go through those and complete those. That would be appreciated. Is there any questions about that? If you have any questions or login difficulties or anything with that, please just reach out to me and let me know. It should be pretty quick. And then finally, I wanted to report to you something, and you have some handouts in your packet. There was really bad news that hit us locally about a month and a half ago. A charter school in Madera County, the Ezekiel Tafoya Alvarado Academy. It is chartered, authorized by Madera Unified. It's been around for about 20 years. The founder and executive director, a man named Nicholas Britannia, they're in trouble. And so Madera Unified reached out to Madera County Office of Education and asked for the Fiscal Crisis and Management Team in the state, affectionately known as FICMAT, which is an auditing firm for the state, asked for FICMAT to come in and do a deep audit into this program at Ezekiel Tafoya. And what they found after their deep dive resulted in like an 81-page report. I gave you a PDF of the whole of that report in your packet. We didn't print it out for you, but it's there for your viewing if you have further interest. What I printed out are some of the final pages. What they found was fraud to the tune of about a little over $1 million, $1,062,000. And the page that looks like this outlines some of the expenses that were being charged off by the executive director, paying for his daughter's college tuition. He bought 2 Ford Raptor trucks for his sons who were allegedly doing custodial work for them. So there was no nepotism. I mean, there's nepotism going on, no policy against that. And then they wrecked the trucks. All kinds of things. So there were so many egregious transactions that happened there. And I'm sharing this with you because the news is out there, and you should know, as a governing board of a local charter school in that county, that this is a live thing, and it's the kind of thing, it's the kind of news that will get the attention of charter schools and districts across the state, and maybe even the legislature. I mean, it's very conceivable that we'll see some kind of new law being proposed because of this sort of behavior.
No, the case hasn't been closed, it's
He's not,
been,
right,
still investigating, correct?
exactly. He's not been charged. He still lives in Madera County.
Okay, so it's
Nick Britannia is in the report here, says he's gonna sue, that it was all unfair and whatever. So, we'll see where that goes, if the Madera DA picks it up and prosecutes. So that's that story, but I want you to know that that school was founded and designed with the intent to allow the executive director to do whatever he wanted to do. There were not sufficient controls and checks in regards to how decisions were made, how the board was informed, how the board, what things the board took action on. For instance, they did not follow the Brown Act. They were not informed of the meetings. They weren't given the packet of material in advance. It is known that Nick Britannia would bring to the meeting the board materials. Meetings would last less than an hour, and then he collected up board materials at the end of it and was able then to, do what he wanted to do. And so insufficient structure built into the school, really structure that was designed to allow the guy to do what he wanted to do. So I wanted to bring that to your attention. If you ever have questions, if it raises questions for you and how we operate or how we handle this particular thing, or what keeps us from falling down that trap, then I want you to have that in your hands and certainly want to be able to answer those questions. So I'll just say that, Western Sierra Charter Schools, as you know, as a board, has been designed to be absolutely accountable and transparent in all ways. And so, for instance, that's why I was pointing out, like on the warrants that you approve, it's meant to be as clear as possible so you can see what expenditures are being made and what they were for. And it's not, Jody.
I just want to speak to the Madera County Office is our back office.
Right.
So that was, when I came on 9 years ago, the idea of maybe at that should we do an analysis, see if we should bring everything in-house, does it make more sense to bring it in-house? And I was like, no, I'd really much rather it stay with Madera County Office of Education, because I love the fact that they see all of our stuff. And if they don't see all the supporting documentation that they might like, or we don't send it appropriately, they're gonna ask.
Right.
And so I have my way of doing it, they have their way of doing it, and combine the more eyes, the better. And so we want to be as transparent as possible, so we've always kept it there. We actually confer and talk to them about whatever this things we're trying to get posted or accumulated, whatever, and they put their 2 cents in.
And ETAA was not with the county office?
No.
They went with a third-party vendor, and the third-party vendor is not a bad organization. They handle a lot of charter schools, but
But their job is not to be a CBO or anything like that. They're hosting transactions.
Right.
And so, that's just a difference, and I think, a huge difference. As you can see, if you read the big report, it's amazing to read. It's, if it wasn't so sad, it'd be laughable to even imagine just how that could happen. The amount of, just
fraud.
fraud, I mean, just egregious and obvious. And so like, wow, how'd that happen? And I think it really mostly came down to no one else saw it. I mean, there really wasn't many eyes on it, and when they did have a chance to look, they had 30 minutes in a board meeting and then didn't really know what they were supposed to do anyway. So I think there was an assumption that the auditor would catch these things and such as well.
At some point, it took a long time, but at some point, it was enough for the authorizer to wonder what's going on, and then ask the county office to bring PICMAT in.
So we pay 3.5% of our LCFF funding to pay for our back office, which, cuts all the checks and do all those things. And so in the
All
other,
of our AP.
yeah, all our payrolls, all run through the office, STIRS, PERS, all those things are gone through that system. And so there's a lot of give and take and discussions. And so I just want to make that point that we've always tried to be as transparent as possible. We invite eyes to see, because we want to make sure everybody's on the same page. Because there are questions from time to time on what is the proper way to post this or do that, and you want to have the most up-to-date ideas. It's interesting, we love three-way conversations with our auditor, MCOE, us, President Unified, if it involves a particular thing in relation to that. So we invite more and more discussion on that, just to make sure, because we find this disgusting and reprehensible. It's going to have an effect on us.
We hate it. I hate it, right? Because it's terrible for us, right? This doesn't,
Doesn't help her.
at all, it's so maddening.
We've been fighting for a long time.
Yeah, it's maddening.
Yeah, so, yeah, as a matter of fact, most of I'm not sure about this school, but other schools in the past, and I think this came up at the CSTC meeting, is the schools that are calling out other schools if they see a problem are charter schools, saying, this thing is happening, go check those guys out. Because we want to make sure it gets caught and found, because we don't want our names tarnished. And this one, it's
Yeah.
it's a Tuesday, it's something to see, and it's, amazing. It's probably gonna be in a movie, I would imagine someday. A lifetime film, exactly what happened. But anyway, I wanted to say that, because we've been talking about the differences amongst the staff here, just trying to really hone in on what are the differences. And that's a big one, that we try to be as transparent as possible, and all, so.
Thank you. And
It's-
that kind of moves on to your report.
Yes. Are we ready for that? Okay. All right, so this is actually through the end of September, and now we know it's actually, we're already in November, so October is, let me just give you October is the end of the period for the first interim. So those are going to be, that first interim report is currently being worked on and analyzed, and we're giving those to our oversight, our authorizers. And so I'm not prepared to go through October yet, because that's sort of a big, there's a first interim, a second interim, and then there's the unaudited actuals at the end of the year. There's also a budget that starts it off. Those are the four big ones. There's the budget, first, second interim, and then the unaudited actuals. So I'll go over the unaudited actuals that go to the end of October at our next meeting, once they've been analyzed, and I'll give you a lot more detail. It's a very big, thick report, and I give an overview of it, and we talk about the details. This one is not going to be real in depth. I just wanted to mention a few things. I can show them on the screen, but I think it's probably just easy enough just to say here that, yeah, I'm gonna just put it on the screen. Share here.
Want us to go off the aggregate one?
No, I can just show the individual. I just want to make sure I'm sharing. Okay, so this is Mountain Home. I'm just going to go over some revenue, and you've seen these, the format before. So I'm going to go over the revenue and expenses. I'm just going to go over the big items that have changed. If you'll see them, just a little bit. Not as good as Eric is on this stuff, that's for sure. Okay, so in the upper box, we have revenue. You'll see the upper statement, we're under comments, upper right, it says current enrollment is at 212 for Mountain Homeschool. The LCF estimate is 207. The current projected ADA for LCFF currently is 200. So we're down a little bit, but I still think that that will come up because over the year, our ADA tends to grow for Mountain Home or get more enrollment. So we'll see if that happens. So we haven't changed any of the projections for LCFF money yet. I think it's too early for that because it will actually, in my opinion, historically, it's always grown. So it's going to show you that we are low, but I think it's going to at least get a lot closer. So I'm just going to leave that one alone. And we'll go down through this. I made a couple of reclasses, not much. So as you see, you know the format. I've gone this before, but the first column, is the adopted budget that the board adopted. The second column there is the budget adjustment. So that's when I see that there's a number to change, I'll put it there so it's clear. The adopted plus the adjustment then makes the working budget, using that. And then the fourth column is what's happened, transpired to date through the end of September. So the year to date at the end of September, remember, we're paid in arrears, we're not paid. So the money comes in after the fact, we spend it first and then we get the money, which is another reason we need to have a reserve, as we discussed before. But right now, the revenues aren't changing, we're keeping those the same. When we look down at the bottom, the net, the revenue less expense, for Mountain Home, originally the idea was we'd have 182,959. The net of the pluses and minuses was $12,000. So now we're projecting 195,000 over the year as a net positive, a net of revenues over expenditures. So not much of a change from the original budget. I'm just going by sections here. I'm not going to rehash the entire thing we already went through a couple times in the past. So here's Glacier High School. So the current enrollment is 82. LCFF estimate was 90. The projected ADA for the current LCFF projected ADA is 87.56. Currently, I'm thinking it's 80, so that's a drop of about 8. So I actually have reduced the revenue there because I don't see how they're making that up. Glacier probably is going to make that up here, so that drops the total revenue by, see, that's about $70,000. So the revenues dropped by 70,000. Then go to the bottom. There's just a couple of changes in and outs there. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't even mention this. On all of these reports, we're seeing dollars from the Proposition 28 arts and music. That was not, we didn't know what that estimate was going to be. That's a Proposition 28. So it was a voter-led proposition that gave money specifically for arts and music. And there's specifically how it's restricted money. I have to use it a particular way. So that is an addition on all the schools from the budget. We didn't know what the number was. It wasn't in there. Now it is for the working budget. So there's additional monies there. because they're very particular, so it's not a generally available funding source for all sorts of things, it's just for arts and music. So I just want to show each school has a certain amount, they're not very big for us, it isn't a large number, but they have an interesting part of that, you're supposed to supplement, not to supplant. I don't know if you've ever heard the terminology, but supplement, not supplant. So you're supposed to take what you, in the theory is, there's a lot of specificity legally as to what that means. We're still trying to figure that out. But generally it means that in a base year, you spend $100 on something. If you get new money, you should spend that 100 plus the money they gave you. So if you gave you 25, it should be 125. You should not then go, oh, now I have new money, I'm gonna move some of that $100 out and use that 25. I'm still gonna spend $100, but I just get to use that money for something else. So that's the spirit of what they're asking us to do. But the question is, what is the base? And there's no clarification of what the base is. So we're trying to figure that out. We want to do it the right way. And so we are waiting for a little bit more clarity on that. I have to talk to various people who are, the legislature has to clarify a little bit more for us to really understand how to properly use it. We have 3 years to use that money, so I have a little time to figure out the property. So for Glacier, the effect of the positives and minuses there, the pluses and minuses come out to be a loss of 81,000 from the revenue less expense, or the net profit, so to speak. And so they're looking to make a net of $50,000 versus what we thought was 130,000. It's pretty tight, but they've been around a long time. It's a very well operated school and it has reserve that comes. So post-pandemic, there have been a lot of adjustments to Glacier because of its small size. It tends, a small absolute dollar number shifts them a lot. The bigger the school, the less the effect of a couple students. In this case, 8 students made a big difference. So we're not sure where that's going to stabilize at. During COVID, it was over 100. Was that was its all-time high. So it's now down to 80, so 82, 80-ish. So, but that's still, the demographics in the mountain area are such that they are. So I don't think there's going to be a whole bunch of movement one way or the other. It seems to hold, but it has a lot of reserves, so I don't see that as being a problem we talked about. All right, so Endeavor, larger school, it's a K-12. Mountain always, is K-8. Glacier is just a high school, it's 9-12. Endeavor is K-12, and so it has, we're looking at that one on the screen now. They got arts and music, Prop 28 of the 43,000 that was added in. The current enrollment, 336. I said that wrong, didn't I? Sorry. Said current twice there. The enrollment was projected at 336 or 337, excuse me. It is at 336, so it's really close to what we thought the projection should be. So there's no change there. So our ADA, it's not going to change. You'll see a little difference between the 3 schools is the money on the other 2 schools for EPA and in lieu had come in from Fresno Unified to pay us by check. And so it goes through a process through the county and through Fresno Unified, and it takes a little longer for us to get the cash. So our actual year to date is, as of the end of September, doesn't show in lieu or education having come in because we haven't received it. So there's a little delay for that one versus Madera, because Madera handles it differently. When we get to bottom, there really aren't many changes at all. And so it's a little extra money. Of course, that's restricted money, so it's not a general increase, but it went from 624,000 net income, net profit, so to speak, revenue expenses. And then, so now it's at 667. We think that will probably hold. Because we're paid in arrears, you see we have a negative amount of 445,000 net revenue versus expense. So right now, at least as of September 30th, we were short of that cash flow difference, which is is normal for this time of year. And that is it for the 3 schools. If anyone has any questions, like I say, we'll go over the first interim next time. That'll be a more detailed report, and there'll be some changes of estimates, and we can talk about those. Thank you.
Endeavor. Please, principal report.
All right, so you probably noticed the new signage coming in our lobby area. We are really happy with the way that's all came together and yeah, just providing a more welcoming entry into our school.
I love it. It looks so great in there. Really, really good.
Let's see. There we go. There's also some new signage outside of the building. So Nick kind of looked at traffic patterns of vehicles and students during high drop off and pickup times. And so there's some new signage out there to help, mitigate some of the problems that we were seeing, namely some of the parents backing out. We wanted to avoid them backing into kids as they were coming into the building. And so then there's some cones out there set up to kind of create a pathway as well. Rafter is up and going now. That's our, entry, scan in, scan out. And we've had really good success with getting students to do that, remembering what to bring and wear their name badges. So I think that's going really well. So this is our little first and second graders. This had to do with their artwork that went along with their book, Giraffes Can't Dance.
That's
So cute. And they do really incredible work.
Looks like they're dancing to me.
Yeah, right. And then we have our sixth graders learning about DNA, and they created these little DNA models in their enrichment class. Also the skeletal system, so they created, in your hands and movable bones, if you will, there. This was the third and fourth grade students studying biomimicry. And, oops, sorry, I'm getting cut off here a little bit. And then the TK Kinder, Nancy would like me to point out, had an unwelcomed visitor in her mind, a spider that visited the class. And then you can see their spiders that they created there as well. The tarantula, Nancy was not a fan of. And then we have Mrs. Coots' math skills class. And so the kids are practicing basic division skills by dividing by fours. They got super competitive and to see who could get as many squares as possible during the game. So this is a class, meant to support some foundational math skills. And then we have our high school art class, Mrs. Turner's. This is her art 2. It's kind of hard to read the white there, but the art 2 class, utilizing wet on wet watercolor techniques to paint the background of their landscape, watercolor paintings. They chose landscape reference photos to then create their own. So that's the word. They referenced photos to create their own landscapes. And then Mrs. Johnson's ROV class. So they also got to do a Zoom with a crew member of the Nautilus. And so this is her class actually on that Zoom. Sorry, it's getting a little bit. So doing pretty cool stuff there. And then we have our cross country team as well. And they have their banquet, totally blanking on the date right now, but coming up the 19th, thank you, coming up soon. And then we also have the Reagan Library field trip featured as part of the leadership class. So on the left with the green screen is kind of the media room. And then there's the Oval Office and then the military like command center, so the kids kind of break up into these different groups, and there's a situation that they're presented with, and they have to kind of make tactical decisions based on what area they've been assigned to, and kind of usually leads them through a group of questions. I haven't been to the new model of it, but they kind of lead them through group think and questions and making decisions and how do you make decisions under pressure, especially when you don't have all the information. So really good practice of their leadership skills. High school and TK through 8 have completed the NWA benchmark testing, and most teachers have completed reviewing scores with families, and then from that, creating student support plans as necessary. And then mid-testing will take place in the very end of the semester or beginning of the semester, depending on if it's TK through 8 or high school. One of the big, so we have Wednesday field trips, and one of the big pieces now once a month is that the students will do a community service project. So they've been going down to the food bank. This is TK through 8, and doing some community service opportunities there. And then some of our teachers are involved regularly as well. Other Wednesdays, I think it's the next one, yes. So another field trip that they did was going to the Shin's Friendship Garden. They opened it just for us to go on a day that they're not normally open, and get to have that experience. And then our theater program put on their Shakespeare, which I think was a bunch of little vignettes that all revolved around the theme of Shakespeare. And big thank you to Aspen Valley Prep Charter School, because they allowed us last minute to use their stage. We had it all arranged, and then with the looming strike, we were, all activities shut down. So they stepped in and let us use their.
Yeah, this was gonna be in Bullard, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But with the shutdown, they weren't allowing any
Right.
outside groups.
Yeah. Coming up, we have some fundraisers, ASB fundraisers. There's one specific tomorrow, so if you want to go to the Habit, right across the street, that will specifically be used towards helping fund prom this year. And then we have the cinnamon rolls back again, and for our seniors, that will be helping to fund grad night, and then other sales will go in towards general ASB. And then we have a CHP guest speaker at our counseling corner, which is that, once a week Zoom that Mr. Hill provides. On Thursday, there's a group of us taking a bunch of kids to UC Merced to do a tour there. Spirit Week, as we already mentioned, is ongoing, and then the counseling corner Greg will be going over the FAFSA application, community service at the food bank again this month. And then in December, we have the Hour Code that Renee Johnson will be hosting, and I think some of our tech team as well. And then our Kids Gift Workshop coming up. In January, we have a ski trip to China Peak, Spelling Bee, and then United States field trip will be one of the those Wednesday field trips as well.
That's great.
That is it.
Thank you so much, Grace. That's great. You guys do a lot of things. From Mountain Home here.
All right. I like to stand in front.
And what to your
We
left
know.
disappeared.
Okay, I am going to I have a lot of great, John did a great job covering a lot of great events for our Oakhurst campus. But last report, I wanted to share with you some of our results as we did some analysis from our state testing and also from our NWA testing as an organization. So I just wanted to kind of take my time to kind of go over that. And then at the very end, I kind of have a list of things that we've done, but I probably don't want to take up more of the board's time. So Parsec for Education, we contract out with them and they help do some of our data analysis. So they take and we're continuing to expand that relationship, and if Mike wants to, he can share more about that. But So they kind of helped put together some of this because through it, I became really interested in both our state testing, but also how our students do when they're in our on-site classes, particularly our math classes versus those that don't take our classes. So they did an initial just kind of enrollment trend, and you'll see this is kind of our enrollment as an organization, not individually. But you can see, here's Glacier, Mountain Home, and Endeavor, and you can see Mountain Home took a big dip. Well, that was when Endeavor started because we were part of Mountain Home and Glacier. You can see both Mountain Home and Glacier took a dip. That's just in terms of just our enrollment. But as an organization, you can see we continue to trend upward enrollment-wise as an organization. So this is just looking at our state test results. This is our whole Western Sierra all together, including Endeavor, Glacier, and Mountain Home. And for state testing, as just a reminder, only 3rd through 8th grade tests and 11th grade. And so overall, 46% of our students met or exceeded the state standards and 29%. Once again, this is just as Western Sierra altogether. If you look more specifically for an Endeavor, you can see 45 in ELA and 24 in math. By the way, I can share this if you want, because I'm going to kind of go through this quickly and highlight a couple things that I think are interesting. For Glacier, once again, this is only 11th grade, and so that can really vary from year to year because typically that's around 20 to 28 students that might be testing, within that time period. So sometimes we see really good, sometimes not. But ELA, 79%. That was really outstanding in terms of met or exceeded, and then 22 in the math. For Mountain Home, that's basically 3rd through 8th grade. We had 44 and 37 in math. And so generally Mountain Home had the highest in terms of the math achievement, and Glacier had the highest in terms of the ELA. Once again, Endeavor has kind of the whole mix. They have 3rd through 8th and 11th grade, just as a, feel free to stop me at any point, by the way. This is just looking as an organization over time. The kind of the turquoise and the darker blue is kind of where you want to be, and this is just going back to 2014 kind of trending. You can hit, 18, 19, and then there was that, COVID year, and then we started testing again in 21 and 22, and most schools did find that there was some drop, because of the whole COVID years that went there. This part down here is what's called like the average distance from standard. 0 is kind of like where you want to be at or higher. And so you can see there's a little, generally you want to see this kind of start, this part trending upward like that. This is an interesting analysis that we've never done, but this is just as, once again, all of Western Sierra, these are kids coming into our school that were not with us. And you can see we were getting also kids coming into our school that were, particularly in math, significantly behind. You can see very few of the students coming into our organization were coming in prepared. And so that does affect our results because we get those kids in, they're already behind. This is just Endeavor, once again, only has a couple years of data, as Endeavor. This is just looking ELA for 21, 22, 22, 23, kind of how many were proficient. Fairly steady in the ELA, slight different, we had a decrease in the far below, and we had some kids move up, but there is, we'd like to see more blue and green there. This is intake for Endeavor. So these are the kids that came in that were not with us before. This is how they came in for Endeavor. For Glacier, kind of the same kind of thing, longitudinal over a period of time. We have more data because Glacier's been around a lot longer. You can see there's kind of various fluctuations. We tend to do extremely well in ELA, and math has kind of gone through some various ups and downs in that sense. This is once again intake. You can see intake wise, particularly in math, those 11th graders that came in, from past years were pretty significantly behind coming into our school.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yes.
Sure. So in intake, are we, so you have the kid coming in intake and he's behind or whatever, are we then gonna track intake?
over time.
Year over
Yes,
year.
yeah. So they did some initial analysis of like 2 or more years, but I had a couple questions on the data that they shared, and so I wanted to, come back on that. But that is one of the another analysis is how they do with us over time. But generally, we see improvement over time.
Yeah.
Right.
That's generally the case, and that's one of the great things about Parsec is it really can granularize the.
And the other thing that they can do is even if they weren't with us, they can, because they have access to all the state data, they can look at that student, even if they weren't with us in
Right.
prior years, they can look at that student's data from multiple schools going back. And so they can pull all that data in and really do some good analysis. This is just some intake once again for Glacier. Here's Mountain Home, longitudinal kind of over time. In terms of like the math results, one of the things that you'll see, there is a kind of a difference in the trend, and I'm gonna highlight that a little bit more, is that you'll see the math actually is trending in the positive direction. Like we are seeing in math, in particular Mountain Home, a pretty significant jump from the prior year to this last year. And that is with even us taking in students that were significantly behind. One of the things that, so this is looking at our NWEA test results. So state test only looks at, 3rd through 8th and 11th grade. NWEA pretty much looks at all the grades and gives you a little bit broader picture of the students that are testing. We tend to get more students testing on the NWEA testing. And so overall as an organization with NWEA, it looks like 60% for Western Sierra were proficient in ELA and about 35% for math. This is breaking it down a little bit more in terms of with our Endeavor. So 56 in ELA, 32 in math in terms of NWEA. This is, and once again, this is looking at this last year, I should say. So not this current school year. 68, 29 for Glacier. Mountain Home, 64 and almost 40% for math. So basically the larger the lines, this is going by grade level, kind of where we, saw some of the most growth. You'll see kindergarten tends to really grow a lot in terms of language arts. This is going into more of the Endeavor growth and Glacier, this is looking at growth for 9th. So this is looking at from fall to spring. So we're looking at, generally we want to see larger lines for growth from how they did at the beginning of the year towards the end of the year. So the 9th and 11th were stronger, but I'm really excited about, I'm gonna kind of, here's Mountain Home. You see some big growth in 3rd grade, and we also see it here in the later grades, but some of the other things that I wanted, I'm going to get to some of the things that I'm even really excited about, some of the analysis here. Well, first of all, because we have such few numbers here, we don't typically, this is like, Felicia would be familiar with this. This is kind of a 5x5 kind of state reporting. We don't actually get colors assigned to like Glacier because I have such small numbers testing. But Parsec did an analysis based off of how our state testing did and where we would fall on these grids, basically. And so Glacier is way over here. In other words, so there's kind of two ways you look at it. One is, how are you doing in terms of your academic overall compared to kind of the state standards? And then this is like the actual, like what they call distance from standard. This is like, did you increase, like did you improve from the prior year or did you decrease? And so for all of our schools, we did see increased significantly for Mountain Home and Glacier in particular. And this is in ELA. Okay, and for math, while we didn't hit that, if you remember, Glacier had that outstanding, like really high score of the ELA was like 80%, and that's why we were way up there in the blue. But you can see we did see increases with all our students. The reason why we're kind of still down here in the yellow
is that we have still a ways to go in terms of where we want to be, and that's fairly common throughout the state in terms of where we should be going in terms of our standards. This is the part that I've just been waiting to share, All right, and so overall, what I wanted to do, and we've never been able to do this analysis, is I took all of the students last year that were enrolled in our on-site math classes. And I wanted Parsec to do an analysis between those that were in our on-site classes and those that did not participate in our on-site math classes. So this is overall for Western Sierra Charter School. And you'll see generally, like, if you look at these, these bars here, whoops, you'll see that the bars are a little bit larger in terms of in-class, non-class. I have some better views for this. Endeavor, we did see particularly like in 10th grade, some growth there, really strong growth compared to those that were not in class. But let me move along here. So for Mountain Home, what was really interesting from fall to spring, our 5th graders, like they were like almost, if I'm understanding this, almost grew like within like 2 years, within like in terms of the amount of growth from where they started to where they ended. But like we saw versus those that did not participate in our on-site classes. And what's interesting, is we saw growth for them both in ELA and in math. Glacier, we also saw some big growth in 9th and 11th, not as much in the 10th grade, which was interesting there. So let me see here. It's not, you can't really, the color is really poor. So let me just explain. So this is ELA, which is kind of interesting also. So these are, we were looking at just kids that are in our math class, not looking at ELA like classes, but just math. So kids that participate in our math class. The first bar is for Endeavor and ELA. Like we saw them closer, like this line, you want to be at this line or above this line, basically. It's like distance from standard. So these kids that were in our math classes did better in Endeavor.
That's ELA.
What?
That's ELA.
Right, but these were looking at kids that were in our math classes. This is how they also did on their ELA. What we saw was even the kids, we saw improvement in their ELA as well as their math, even if they were just in the math. In talking to math teachers, it makes sense. There's a lot of language arts now in the standards of math. It's hard to see here, this line right here, 12.8. So math, like the students that were in math classes scored significantly better than those that weren't in the math classes in ELA for Mountain Home. Like they were above standard 12.8. And in Glacier, you can see they're really big compared those that were in the classes versus not. And then here in math, interesting thing is like with Endeavor, for the kids that were in and out of the math classes, they were generally similar in terms of how they scored on their state testing. But for Mountain Home, we can see a marked difference, 23% above the distance from standard, not 23, but 23 points above the distance from standard versus those that weren't in the class were negative 62. And then for Glacier, even though we didn't quite hit that 0 mark, you can see like negative 140 for those that weren't in the math classes versus negative 13. Like we were that much closer in terms of hitting that distance from standard for math. So
And this was last
this is last year. So it raises a variety of questions. It's like, I know we have great math teachers, is it looking at, there are some differences in curriculum that we're using between the two campuses. And I do think particularly some of our math teachers in Oakhurst have been doing some professional development, looking at some Stanford research kind of based on the way that they're presenting the materials in the classes. And I think maybe they may be onto something in how they're presenting it in our union model where they're not having the kids every single day. So one of the things that we're kind of exploring is just is there something that could be potentially replicated that is happening, particularly in Mountain Home and some of our high school classes, that could maybe be, whether it's to other math classes or to general, looking at
Shared
that?
organization.
Also, isn't, I could be wrong, isn't that last year for Mountain Home,
Mhm.
and Glacier, was that, or at least Mountain Home, it was actually only 2 days a week versus 3 days a week? Now.
So it was 3 days a week, but it was like Monday, Tuesday, Thursday last year for some of it, and then Monday, Wednesday. It was 3 days. But I do think, and I know like I just think that there could be some things in terms of just, because it is very challenging for a teacher to take 5 days worth of material and present it in 2 or 3 days a week. Endeavor also, I think, does 2 days in person and 1 day virtual, And so looking at all those things, right now they're looking at the math curriculum too, just to see. We are using some different math curriculums between the two campuses, and also maybe some of the techniques. And so that's something, kind of a project I have moving forward this year, is just looking, as I'm newer to the Oakers campus, because I've been in Endeavor, it is interesting for me to see some of these things. And we follow a very similar model in many of the ways. So what is it that is so unique that's going on there, that it's kind of exciting to me to see like some, to really see like.
This, very helpful to see that, very validating.
So, I'm not gonna cover all this, John covered a lot of this, I can share out all this, we've been doing a variety of things. I do wanna give Diane a shout out, she did the Scholastic Book Fair, which is a kind of a fundraiser, and she organized that there in Oakhurst, and it was a great turnout there, also,
So fun.
yeah, great job, but a lot of work for you,
Yeah.
Scholastic does a lot.
yeah.
It was great.
And I also just want to shout out to Kaylee Friesen, who organized the Spirit Day. She included this year the Mountain Home students, and I think they really got into that. We did activities or anything. And then she's also organized some fundraisers for our Glacier ESB with the Pizza Factory and Roundtable, and has already raised over $500 for our ESB, for our Glacier thing there. So that's just kind of thing. Here's just a few pictures from the PE Day that was mentioned before, that's happening during and we've heard good reports. You already mentioned Raptor. So we rolled that out with students with ID cards. We're about a week behind for where Endeavor's at. And so this week, students are starting to get used to it. Next week, we're gonna do that. And then starting in the spring, we're gonna really implement the whole visitor check-in with parents and other visitors in there. And that is my report.
Thank you, Eric. That was
Awesome.
great. Thank you. I really like that first second.
Yeah, they're dynamite. And their business is exploding across the state and school districts everywhere. And they're local boys.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the founder and their operating officer came out of the Madera Unified. They're right down here in downtown Fresno, near Fresno Unified. So, yeah.
Well, moving on to item 14, board training provided by Charter Schools Development Center on online governance.
So, as I mentioned, this is about a half hour to 40 minutes of some various little video presentations. I don't have any popcorn, but we do have candy. If this is probably a good time if we want to take a stretch and restroom break. And if we can convene back in here in 5 minutes. And then what we'll do is they'll play the video clip. It's all pretty straightforward. I think a lot of this, because you're veteran board members, won't be a surprise, but there will be some things I think you'll go, you might have some questions or thoughts about. So I'll give an opportunity between each clip, any question or discussion around that, and then we can move on to the next clip. And I appreciate your forbearance as we do it, but it's one of those things we're required to do now, and I hope you will find it to be edifying and useful. So
we will stop right now at 4:51 and then reconvene from the break.
great, thank you.
It is 4:59. We'll get started on doing action 14.
So,
Not action, I'm sorry, I apologize, item number 14.
item 14 is board training, and bring that up here. So this is a number of short video presentation segments in regards to an overview of what charter school board the work is. And I hope that you find it useful. It is put on, as you can see from the screen there, by the Charter School Development Center, and they're a very trustworthy partner and source of information. So I will play these segments one at a time. If there's any questions or anything, we can answer those, and then we'll move on to the next segment. Does that sound good?
Hello and welcome to Module 1 of Governing Board Training put on by CSDC. I'm Catlin O'Halloran and I am the School Governance and Policy Specialist here at CSDC, and I'm going to be walking you through a few modules of Governing Board Training. I want to thank you for your service on a charter school governing board. This is a really important job that allows a charter school to function, and it's big and sometimes it's complicated. In this online version of CSDC's governance training, you'll just sort of scratch the surface of the things that you'll need to know. But after you complete this training, I encourage you to join other board members at CSDC's annual Leadership Update Conference, which is held annually. At the conference, you can participate in our governing board offerings, including in-depth, in-person information. Having served on a governing board, I can highly recommend the CSDC conference, and I think it'll help you how to learn how to govern your school effectively. I serve actually on two boards. I serve on a charter school governing board and I serve on a traditional school governing board. So some of the things that I will reference in this training will be in relation to my experiences and in relation to working with many charter school governing boards up and down the state of California. So let's get started. This module is going to answer questions like, why have a board? What power does the board have? What are common problems of governing board evolution? What can I expect as a new board member from onboarding? And what's the role of the governing board? We're also going to sort of just scratch the surface of what charter school leadership should look like. And I hope that all of these things will be valuable to you. So let's start with why have a board anyway? Well, first of all, California law compels it. So if you have a charter school and also if it is a nonprofit organization, you're compelled to have a governing board. A board also offers a breadth and depth of perspectives that's important. So sometimes you will get members of your board who have a specialty in finance or law, and all of them have an interest in your school. So it's important to have different voices on your board. A governing board provides crucial expertise as you go through items that are necessary to govern a school. And having a board shares the responsibility for implementation, so no one's doing it alone. It also mitigates personal liability if you're incorporated, and it affords continuity beyond one individual. We'll speak briefly in this module about governing boards at the beginning of a charter school and also how directors and other administrators play into that role. In addition, having a governing board provides oversight, and that's a really important function for a charter school to have. So let me touch on this just for a moment. There is a whole different set of modules that covers the Brown Act, and I encourage you to watch that. But I want to make sure that you're familiar with what the Brown Act is and how it's important for charter schools, because it's recently been changed. So beginning in January 2020, all charter school governing boards became subject to either the Ralph M. Brown Act or the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act. And that was as a result of a bill by Senator Connie Leyva, and the bill number for reference was SB 126. Now, most governing boards in California will fall under the Brown Act rather than the Bagley-Keene Act. And so that's why we have special modules that are specific to the Brown Act. Again, I encourage you to watch the Brown Act modules after you complete the Governing Academy training. So let's talk a little bit about governing boards and their evolution. There are 1,300 charter schools in the state, and I can guarantee you that no two governing boards are alike, but there are some common themes. So many schools and their governing boards experience sort of a startup phase and then a maturation process. I'm going to touch on that a little bit, and some of it may seem familiar to you if you are on a board currently. So in the beginning, in the planning stage, there's sort of an informal feeling. Oftentimes you're literally meeting around a kitchen table. There's really active founder involvement. So either the person or the persons who started the school are usually really involved. There's often very little structure or experience. This is new to everyone. Often when this happens, when charter schools are started and governing boards are started, and so no one comes to the table with any real expertise. And these new boards are often flexible but unstable. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So again, in the startup stage of the governing board, someone or a group of people got an idea to start a charter school. And early in that beginning stage, the board is usually made up of those people and their friends. Other interested parties in the school may be involved, parents, but that usually comes a little bit later. It's usually a board that's sort of a founder's board. Everybody sort of stumbles through things together, and there are lots of surprises and setbacks. I was on the beginning of a charter school. I'm the co-founder of a charter school, and I can tell you that some of the things that came up in our early days were very unexpected. And we all sort of got through them together, literally because we were flexible and because we had an interest in getting the school up and running. That having been said, the board often plays a real outsized role here. They are doing things like painting buildings or helping to hire teachers. And those are things that should phase out as your charter school gets a little older. Because in order for the school to continue, this form of governance usually has to phase itself out. And in a couple of years, a more stable administrative and board relationship is formed. And that's between your charter school administrator and your governing board. We sometimes refer to that combination of folks as the governance team. So again, in the startup stage, you'll have a sort of tight group of folks working together. As it begins to phase out a little bit, you'll see that founders may even transition out. And there are lots of new faces. There's the development of real formal policies, and CSDC can help you with that because we have formal policies available to all of our members. And there's a reduced board role in the day-to-day management. So that day-to-day management is really turned over to the charter school administrator, and the charter school governing board focuses on governance. So what power does the board have? First, let me tell you that I want to be really clear about this, that an individual charter school board member or an individual, really any sort of board member, does not have power alone. The power comes when the board works well together and can make decisions and set policy. So, and within that structure, it's important to know that there are different kinds of charter schools. One thing that is commonly different from some schools to another is that some schools are called independent charter schools. These are schools who receive their funding directly from the state, and they're typically also organized as a nonprofit corporation. These can still be mom and pop charter schools. They don't have to be corporate charter schools, but they are, or larger charter schools, but they are independent from their authorizer in terms of funding. A dependent charter school is an arm of the district, and it is governed usually by a separate board, but the funding comes through the district or the county office of education, and there are more controls from those folks over the funding and spending on a charter school. They're often, dependent charter schools are really run by the district or the county office of education, and oftentimes you may not even have a governing board that meets separately. There is some other things that you should know about that are specific to the legal status of the school. There are MOUs and bylaws, and we'll talk about that in a minute in terms of important documents for you to have. And the terms of the charter as well is something for you to become familiar with, because those can vary from school to school. Recently, we've also seen quite a few laws that govern charter schools. And so we need to be really familiar with those laws. And lastly, there's an operational relationship with the charter grantor or authorizer and other agencies, and that can change the legal status of your school as well. So it's important that you know about these things for your specific school and know where those documents are located. So what are the board roles and responsibilities? What is it you've gotten yourself into now being on a charter school board? Typical roles are to establish and uphold the school's mission and vision. So that should be something that's agreed upon by the administrative team, by the governance team, and it's something that's actually adopted formally by the board. That is sort of your guiding light for running your charter school. All things should be run through the mission and vision to make sure that they match. There's also lots of other pieces to this: educational, fiscal, operational, legal compliance piece, and really importantly, academic growth of your students. So those are things that the board has some role and responsibility in. You'll also develop and approve short and long-term goals. You'll establish policies and delegate power. So you'll delegate that power onto some of your administrators and away from the governing board. You'll hire and evaluate top administrative staff. That's a really important piece. I go into that quite in detail in our conference, but we don't have time for that now. But just keep that in mind. That's a really important piece. You'll attend to board business and corporate formalities. So there'll be things for you to do and places for you to go that relate directly to your service on the governing board. The governing board should do a self-assessment as well and monitor its own performance. And most importantly, I think you are an advocate on behalf of your school and an advocate on behalf of charter schools. So running a tight ship as a governing team, really running a good charter school is important to all the charter schools in California. A few more roles and responsibilities is that you will adopt very specific financial policies and an annual budget, and then you'll monitor the fiscal status. This is sometimes where charter schools can get into sort of a messy area when there's not enough oversight around finances and budget. So that's a really big job for you to have now. You'll also do an external audit that's important for the governing of your school. You'll adopt a long-term financial plan. You'll often be involved in things like fundraising and grant seeking. And then there are other pieces like obtaining facilities and working with your authorizer. One of the things that CSDC has, and that I'll attach to this presentation, is an annual board calendar. And you can make sure that the work of the board is completed in a timely fashion. So in the annual board calendar, you will use it to sort of plan your year ahead. And at every meeting, you'll address some of these topics. So when you come onto a governing board, here's what you should expect. You should expect to have these items that are listed here presented to you either on a computer, via email or thumb drive, or on some other way that's electronic, or a hard copy. So you'll want to have things like the charter document, which will tell you the date you'll need for charter renewal. An MOU, which is or an annual operating agreement, which goes into some detail with your granting agency and may procure services for special education and those sorts of things. Often these MOUs address things like finance support services, liability, indemnification, special ed facilities, those sorts of things. So it's also more changeable than a year-to-year, it's more changeable year-to-year than a 5-year charter is. So make sure that you get your hand on and look through all of these documents. The bylaws, articles of incorporation are very important. You need to make sure that, again, you know the mission and vision of your school. and all of the pieces that that it takes to run it and to understand it, because you're again going to be an advocate on behalf of your school as a governing board member as well. So in conclusion, being on a governing board is a really big job. It's important that you're humble enough to know that what you know and what you don't know, and to ask questions, because none of this almost everybody who participates in a charter school governing board is brand new to it. None of this is information that you came in with. So please ask questions of CSDC, or ask questions of your governance team. Be helpful enough to support your fellow board members as you work to reach consensus. I think that that's a really important takeaway from this, is that board members working together create very effective governing boards in schools. And be resourceful enough to do the research and put the time that you're needed in to meet your commitment, because it is a lot of time. And again, I thank you for stepping up to do this. So CSDC offers some on-site in-depth training for governing boards. We can do this over Zoom, we can do this in person. And again, at our conference, we offer some more training. So this module is really meant to serve just as an overview or a first taste of governing. There is so much more to learn. Thank you.
All right, so any questions first from that segment? She did mention, because I obviously I watched all these first, knowing that I was going to be putting it in front of you. And how do I smallerize this? And so the governing board binder for each of you, like we've never done that, and that was sort of a new one for me. It makes so much sense. And actually went to a breakout session on creating governing board binders, and she gave a list there. So we are in the process right now. So God willing, we anticipate that at the January meeting, you're going to get a big looking binder, and it's going to have a whole bunch of these good things in it. If we include the charter document itself, she mentions having the charter and all these other things. The charter document itself is 300 pages, so it's like this thick. If we put the charter document in with everything else, it will be perhaps a 3-inch binder. If we don't put the charter document in, we give that to you by PDF, then we can make this like an inch and a half binder. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree.
Do the smaller, give you the charter
If you
document.
want to research, you can.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
The charter is also on our website.
So that's great. So that's thank you for that. That's good.
Well, I hope I'm not making binders.
And then she
I
had,
think I only did inch binders.
That might be enough. We'll take a look, otherwise we'll.
But definitely not to add that charter.
Yeah.
how it mentioned something about how do you monitor your own performance as a board? How would you say that? I never heard of that.
So there's resources out there. CSDC, I think, has resources, and there's probably others out there that would be a tool that could be used for board self-assessments or the questions to ask. It would be built around, sort of these domains that they're mentioning, like here's your job. And so it would be questions around that. So that's something.
Not the actual people who actually attend, Western parents or staff that attend Western State charter schools to give an assessment on.
There may be some component of that, but my guesstimate is that the vast majority of people that are in our schools, as far as families, have no idea that that's the case. Many of them don't even know there is a board. So probably the best evaluator is of your own self-evaluation.
Okay.
But we can look into that if you
No,
decide.
I was curious. How do you do that? If there is such a thing.
Okay, we ready for the next one?
Mhm.
Hello and welcome to Module 2 of Governing Board Training. This module is called Speaking the Language, Making Sense of the Alphabet Soup. So it's a brief overview to make you familiar with terms that, because educators kind of speak a different language, and if you don't have an education background, I'm going to walk you through some of the terms that you will hear commonly when serving on a charter school governing board. And again, I'm Catlin O'Halloran. I'm with CSDC as the School Governance and Policy Specialist, and this is the second module of a series of modules on governing board training. So let's start with our alphabet soup in Sacramento. There are lots of organizations that help to create policy around public education. They're often collectively called the Education Coalition. And the formal membership, some of these things will sound familiar to you, some of them will not. It's organizations that represent different groups who have an interest in public education. So for instance, you'll see the California Teachers Association and Parent Teacher Association, and then you'll see things like boards and organizations that are specifically representing school administrators or charter schools like CSDC. There are a couple of other pieces of information that I want to talk to you about in terms of Sacramento and the way that people speak about things. So when there is a piece of legislation that is coming through the state legislature, if it originated in the assembly, it will start with two letters, A, B for Assembly Bill, and then it will have a number. So for instance, it may be called AB 123, and that means Assembly Bill 123. For the most part, and there's a little nuance to this, but we won't go into that today. For the most part, you can follow that bill through the legislature. You can also follow it online at CSDC so that you can understand where the bill goes and how it impacts charter schools. Similarly, if there is a bill that originates in the Senate with a senator, it will be called SB for Senate bill, followed by some numbers. Again, these indicate really the starting place or house of origin of a piece of legislation, and it begins to go through the committee process with those numbers and those letters. And again, that's how you follow it to find out if it ever becomes law. So in addition to having names for all of the organizations that are interested in public education and for the legislation that is around public education, there are other acronyms and names for programs, assessments, departments. Again, I won't go over all of the ones that are out there. I will, however, attach a list for you, a very comprehensive list that you can use as a reference for all of those programs and acronyms that are out there. So just a couple that I want to highlight for you on here. BTSA is often still called BTSA, B-T-S-A, BTSA, even though it's now actually formally been changed to a teacher induction. And, but it was previously called the Beginning Teacher Support and Assessment Program, and you'll often hear people refer to it that way, even though the name has formally been changed. In addition, the CDE, you will hear that a lot. The CDE is the state department that is run by an independently elected superintendent of public instruction. So CDE stands for California Department of Education, and it is run by the independently elected superintendent of public instruction, but the folks who work there are state workers who are not independently elected. One last thing I want to add is that the State Board of Education is another governing body that's really important to get to know because they have some authority over how charter schools look and are run statewide. So a few more things about Sacramento and politics. You probably have all heard of the LCAP, which is the Local Control and Accountability Plan. That's sort of the framework for your charter school that contains all of the information on how money will be spent when it comes from the state. In 2020, they added something that sometimes is called the Little LCAP, and it's just a 2020 only at this point plan that needs to be formulated that is now called the Learning Continuity and Attendance Plan. And again, it's similar to the traditional LCAP in that it helps to organize how the money is being spent, and it's required by the state. And all of that comes through a funding formula called the Local Control Funding Formula, which is LCFF. So again, I understand that these things are confusing. I have attached the list so that you can refer to them, but these are names that you will hear over and over again. Your teachers may also be in a retirement system. Your administrators may be in a retirement system. These are, again, state agencies, and they're public employee or state teachers retirement programs. They're called CalSTRS and CalPERS. And lastly, not all charter schools have any affiliation with a union, but for those who do, there are a couple of other organizations that are important to know. AFSCME, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, and SEIU, the Service Employees International Union. Those are union governance agencies that work with employees at public schools. At the federal level, they also have programs that have acronyms. ESSA is one that you'll hear about. ESSA is Every Student Succeeds Act. It's a piece of federal legislation that replaced No Child Left Behind. So this piece of legislation holds schools accountable for how students learn and achieve. The Free and Reduced Lunch Program, which you probably have heard of also, is actually sort of more than a meal. It does, in fact, make participants eligible for free or reduced lunches, but it has been long traditionally used for to fund services in schools and to make students eligible for reduced fees and school-related programs and services. So often its funding formulas are calculated based on your free and reduced lunch count. And so it's important to keep an accurate count of free and reduced lunch students. And lastly, the IDEA is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and that directs how special education is run in California and in the nation. There are lots of acronyms that relate to facilities, and they have different programs and different terms of the facilities. There are ones that are specific to charter schools and facility grants. There is Prop 39, which is a ballot initiative that was passed in 2000, but it's often used as a standalone acronym for securing facilities from an authorizing district or a community. And then the Division of State Architects, if you intend to build on your campus, you will work with DSA, which is the Division of State Architects. So in conclusion, this is a list just to describe some of the acronyms. They are sort of their own special language. Educational administrators, policy wonks, and politicos will pepper their speech with these acronyms, and it can be really confusing. It can be easy to get lost. So don't be afraid to stop a speaker and ask them what they mean. And if they refer to a program that's unfamiliar to you, you shouldn't have to know those things prior to serving on a governing board. So you can feel free to ask and people will explain them to you. Thank you for completing Module 2, and I look forward to seeing you in Module 3.
All right, any thoughts or questions about all of the terminology?
That's a lot.
It's a lot. I would think that, well, there's many of those that you folks, you've been on for a couple years. You're familiar with a lot of the ones that are germane to us. Shall I go on?
Is that a question?
I know. Is that a threat?
All right, I think it's back.
All right, here we go.
Hi, and welcome to Governing Board Module number 3. This is the training that involves discussions around laws, lobbying, and the legislature. Again, I'm Catlin O'Halloran. I am the School Governance and Policy Specialist for CSDC, and I'm going to walk you through a little bit around these topics. Now, I teach a much more detailed session on this subject every year at our annual Leadership Update Conference, and I really hope that you'll join me for that session as your time allows. But today, we're just going to cover the basics. Today, I'm going to give you a brief overview of how charter schools intersect with policymakers, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what you can do to ensure that charter schools stay viable in California. Now, as you may or may not know, charter schools have been around in California for around 25 years. And as long as they've been around, and as long as folks know what charter schools are, everybody has an opinion on them. Some opinions, though, are based on too little information or erroneous information. One of the jobs of a charter school board member is to become an advocate on behalf of your school and the charter school movement in general. So again, in the Leadership Update Conference, I teach a much longer and a more detailed course on this. But today, I just want to talk you through a little bit about what you would need to do to become a charter school advocate. So the first thing you need to do is understand exactly where charter school funding comes from. It actually comes from a variety of sources, but the vast majority of our funding comes from the state of California. I won't try to explain the Prop 98 funding formula in this module or in any module really, but Prop 98 is a complicated voter-approved constitutional amendment that guarantees minimum funding levels for K-12 schools and for community colleges. Now, most of you are likely familiar with LCFF. It's a school finance system that allows charter schools and school districts to determine their own priorities in conjunction with the work that they do around the LCAP. And it allows for a much more flexible expenditure of funds. So for charter schools, this works well, but it's important to understand that this came from the legislature, and it was a redirection of funds that used to be sort of siloed into what we called categorical programs. And those are all collapsed now, and we have now the LCFF and the LCAP that guides the way that we spend money. So let's review some of the basic information about the legislature. In California, we have a two-house, or what's called a bicameral legislature. That means that everybody in California has two people who represent them in the legislature. You will have a senator and an assembly member that you'll need to get to know. And both of these individuals are elected to represent you, and you should work toward establishing a professional relationship with them. And I'll talk a little bit about how to do that. So while you will occasionally get the opportunity to meet your elected representative or visit with them in a meeting in their office, see them at an event, the folks that you really want to get to know are legislative staff. Every member of the California State Legislature has full-time staff in the state capitol and full-time staff closer to home in their district offices. These staff members will interact with the community and with interest groups, and they are your first contact when you have a question or when you want to present information to your elected official. You can schedule meetings through legislative staff, or you can meet with them instead. All the information that you provide them will eventually end up with the legislator. And I tell you that as a recovering legislative staffer. There are opportunities for legislative staff to have conversations with the elected official they work for nearly every day. There are very specific briefings that go on, and the legislative staff will get the information that you provide to the legislator, even if you don't have an opportunity to meet with the legislator in person. So as I mentioned before, you at your home address are represented by 2 members of the California State Legislature. Likewise, though, your school is also. So, and in addition, if your parents live in, if you draw from more than one legislative district, the parents of the students in your schools will also have an opportunity to contact and establish a professional relationship with their legislators. So all of these things lead up to more influence for you and more influence for your charter school. Knowing your legislators and how to talk to them and when to talk to them is a very important skill. Now, the Advisory Commission on Charter Schools, and this is switching gears a little bit, is a governing body, the name of which obviously suggests that it advises someone on charter schools. The group that it advises is called the State Board of Education, and that's a body, an 11-member body that is appointed by the governor of the state of California. These folks will provide oversight and information on things like funding determinations and previously on charter school renewals. Now, the State Board of Education is the final word on all of these matters. ACCS is simply an advisory body, as its name suggests. But the State Board of Education's role with regard to charter schools has changed a bit over the years. And now the State Board only hears charter appeals under what's called the abuse of discretion standard. And it won't authorize charter schools going forward. So in the past, the State Board of Education was able to be an authorizer of charter schools. That's no longer the case. However, they will, they can select a local body to be an authorizer of a charter school if in fact the State Board of Education overturns the decision of a local body on appeal. Another body that has a significant role in determining outcomes for charter schools is the judiciary. I've listed here a few recent examples of cases where the judicial branch weighed in and changed charter law and practice. There are other cases that are currently pending in the courts throughout California, but it's important to understand that charter law is also influenced by the judiciary. As I'm wrapping up here, and again, I really encourage you to participate in more of the information and sessions that are available to CSDC members. I just want to point out that there were two bills in 2019, AB 1505 and SB 126, that were passed by the legislature, and they really significantly changed the way that charter schools function. So charter school advocates, and by definition, again, all governing board members are charter school advocates, really need to step up and work to prevent further erosion of California's charter school laws. There are several things that you can do as a CSDC member that I encourage you to participate in. If you would like to sign up through our contact email link on our website, you can sign up for what we call the Board Bulletin. It is a publication written exclusively for charter school board members, and it goes into depth on some of the topics that I've discussed in here, as well as other things, and it comes out about 6 times during the year. I'd also encourage you to submit your email address so that you can stay tuned for opportunities to participate in charter school advocacy. We really need all hands on deck if we are going to continue to make charter schools viable in the state of California. So I thank you again for listening to Module 3, and we will see you again on Module 4.
All right, any questions about that? Nothing? Okay, right along. Pardon? I know.
Hi, and welcome to Module 4 of Governing Board Training. The topic we're going to cover right now is governing boards, governance versus management. In the CSDC online newsletter, the Board Bulletin, which I hope you're all subscribing to, I wrote an article about governance versus management, and specifically, I discussed part of the issue that I'm going to cover in today's module, because understanding the difference between governance and management is one of the most important lessons for board members. But first, let's make sure that we're all on the same page with regard to the differences between a charter school and a traditional or a district school. The use of language is very important here. Both charter schools and district schools are public, taxpayer-funded schools. You'll find that in describing these schools to folks who are unfamiliar with education issues, you'll need to make it clear that charter schools are public schools. A distinct difference between a traditional or a district school board and a charter school board is that members of the district school board are elected by a vote of the people, and charter school board members are usually appointed or selected by individuals within their own charter school ranks. So now let's turn to a big issue that faces all school boards. It's governance versus management. So overall, governing board members are responsible for setting the policies that guide the charter school. Board members have other obligations that are related, including things like passing a budget and hiring and firing the lead school administrator. But management, however, is to be done by administrators. They are the folks hired by the charter school to run the day-to-day activities of the school, and they should be empowered to make those decisions. Then it's the job of the charter school board or the traditional governing board to hold them accountable for outcomes. So let's take a look at some of the specific examples of what I'm talking about. When it comes to finance, here's a few things that should happen. The board itself should monitor fiscal solvency and management of the school. They also do things like approve the budget and spending and fiscal priorities. The school staff, so the administrators, they'll develop the budget. They'll work together to develop a budget, and they'll implement the fiscal recommendations that the board lays out. Now, in other modules, I talk a little bit about committee structure. I also talk about this in our conference. And if you have a board committee, which may consist of, say, a couple of board members and maybe someone from the administrative team, as well as perhaps parents or even students, that committee will come up with things to recommend an annual budget or major budget changes. They'll also review budget and audit reports. So it's an important role, but it provides recommendations to the overall governing board. Now, when it comes to academics, your educational program, the board will do things like monitor student performance and ensure that curriculum aligns with mission. So for instance, if you are a STEM school, if you are a Montessori school, if you're a Waldorf school, you'll have different curriculum based on the school that you're in, and you'll want to make sure as the board that your educational program lines up with that. School staff will develop and align standards, curriculums, and assessments, and they'll develop things like a bell schedule, a school calendar, and or a class schedule. Again, in this role, the board committee will really review some granular student performance data and research and develop a student data collection system. Now, when we talk about personnel, it's important to understand that the board's role in personnel, while important, is very specific. The board has an employee of one. So board members will do things like hire and fire the school administrator and approve personnel policies. And if you have not yet taken a look, I encourage you to look at CSDC's personnel policies that are online on our website for you to use as sample policies and create new board policies for your school. In addition, school staff will do things like hire and fire and evaluate the rest of the staff. So that means the teachers and all of those sorts of evaluations, those all come from your lead administrator. School staff will also develop and implement a professional development plan for staff at the school. Role of a board committee in this case could be to conduct administrator interviews and evaluations. So to maybe wade through, say, 10 applicants and send the board a recommendation. That would be an important role for a board committee. Another possible role for a board committee is to develop or recommend personnel policies. While there are specific roles in facilities, so things like major renovations or capital campaigns that will require the participation of the entire governance team, there are also some specific things that the board may do and the administrators may do. So in this role, the board will do some things like, actually enter into the legal contracts and approve the construction or remodeling of facilities. School staff will do things like conduct a capital campaign or a school site needs assessment. And a board committee in facilities, which is really important because of this big topic, will do things like research a school site or find funding or facilities options and make recommendations to the board. Also, the issue of deferred maintenance is an ongoing project that should appear on the board agenda regularly and should be reviewed by both the administrator and by the board. Now, the school administrator is held accountable by the board in an evaluation process that specifically talks about student achievement, among other things. In the workshop I teach at our annual conference, I go into much more detail on setting goals and evaluating the new school administrator. But for now, understand that there needs to be a process in place and that some of the most detailed reviews should be around how the administrator leads the school through student achievement and performance issues. This is obviously the reason that we're holding school is to help students achieve. So it's important to really have some specific focus on this. Strategic planning is what leads into the evaluation for the board as well as for the director. So I recommend to folks to always do board self-evaluations as well as a director or an administrator evaluation. This is really, strategic planning is really the roadmap for which the entire governance team can hold itself accountable. Now, the governance team, and when I talk about that, I'm talking about both your board and your school administrator. CSDC recommends that every school do this strategic planning every year. It might look like hiring somebody to lead you through this process or by using the CSDC planning toolkit that we're currently developing. I will actually reach out to all of you when the toolkit is developed and let you know it's available online. And it's a basic way to do strategic planning, but maybe something that's a good starting spot for your school. In order to evaluate the performance of your administrator, the board must set clear goals and outline job duties. In addition, the board must stay in its own lane and not get into the habit of day-to-day decision making. I encourage you to join us for our annual conference because I do talk a whole lot more about this particular subject. But again, it's important that in order to be efficient as a governance team, you all understand your very specific roles and responsibilities. So here are just a few more thoughts on your board role here. Come to your meetings prepared to debate topics, not to learn about them. You'll need to do all your homework up front, and this might mean emailing questions to or meeting with the administrator or other cabinet level individuals prior to the meeting to get your questions answered. Most of what I've shown you today are examples of best practices, but I encourage you to consider them as you move forward. Thank you so much for joining me in this module. And now we are on to module number 4. I'm sorry, module number 5.
Yeah. Don't mess that up. Any questions there or comments? Helpful high level, kind of broad overview. The link that you'll have, and I'll send out an email, I'll see what CSDC set up for us, but you all will now have an account with CSDC. And what I'm asking you to do, like I said before, was to enter into this process on your own and do the Brown Act training. But you'll also, if you want to go back and look at this set of stuff is available too. And I think any of the other resources, if you get interested and want to sort of just search around the CSDC site and what they have, I think you'll have access to the whole thing.
Welcome to module number 5. In this module, we're going to discuss some basic information that is unique to school human resources. And we'll talk a little bit about how these items can also impact your budget. The Education Employment Relations Act established collective bargaining in California's public schools in 1976. In 2000, there was legislation that included charter schools into collective bargaining. Now, the regulatory agency that oversees collective bargaining in California is called PERB, or the California Public Employment Relations Board. The purpose of this law is to promote the improvement of personnel management within public school systems and to allow employees to join unions if they wish. Now, according to the National Alliance for Public Charter Schools, in the last year that they had records, 2016-2017, that school year, 11.3% of charter schools in the nation were unionized. Unfortunately, the California Teachers Association, while actively recruiting charter schools to join their ranks, at the same time lobby and support legislation to dismantle charter schools. They've worked at it really hard within the last couple of years, and there doesn't seem to be an end in sight at this point. They're currently calling for a moratorium on all charter schools, and we'll have to see what happens with that effort. But let's circle back to the EERA. EERA doesn't mandate bargaining units. It simply allows for employees who wish to join a union or to form a bargaining unit. Absent a bargaining unit, the charter school is allowed to create their own personnel policies and work out the details of those things with their employees. Now, CSTC has sample policies that can be used to create these sort of personnel policies within your school. Here are some important tips for employers to know when it comes to union activity. So when you ask what is legally prohibited behavior for employers to engage in if union activity begins at your school, you have to start with these 4 things that are legally prohibited behavior: threats, interrogation, promising a special benefit, for instance, and surveillance. Those are strictly prohibited by law. Switching gears now, let's talk a little bit about retirement systems. So CalSTRS, as it's known, is a defined pension plan for teachers. Most teachers in traditional district schools belong to this retirement fund. If you choose to enroll your teachers in CalSTRS, it's important to understand the impact that this will have on your budget going forward, as there is an employer contribution. CalPERS is also a defined retirement benefit plan, but it's traditionally management and classified staff, people like office aides and school custodians who belong to this retirement program. But again, due to the employer contribution, CalPERS will have a significant impact on your budget if you choose to adopt this retirement plan. Moving away from retirement programs, it's important to understand the changes made to charter school teacher credentialing by AB 1505. AB 1505 was passed in 2019, and among other things, it states that the new law states that by July 1, 2020, so by now, all charter school teachers, including contracted teachers, must have a professional fitness evaluation by the CTC, the Commission on Teacher Credentialing. Teachers employed by charter schools must also hold a teaching permit or certification appropriate for that teacher certificated assignment. So it's important to understand in the HR world that these are new changes with regard to teacher credentialing. Now, I've only touched very briefly on the HR issues in this module. I tried to limit the presentation to the issues that I think will impact you the most. But one last point of note is that you need to hire a really well-qualified HR professional. This person will keep you out of enormous trouble if you violate any of these rules or don't understand the fiscal impacts of becoming involved in some of these programs. That's all for now. Thank you again for joining me today.
All righty, wow, we're big test, I don't know what that is. Can we do this as a group? Sure. Let's see what we got here. Completion union. Let's see how we did. Here. What? How about summer?
Oh, very good work. That's good. Give me an A. I have high expectations. 4.0 student here.
We're gonna help Summer get her certificate.
All right. Take it.
Okay. Is it illegal to question employees about their union sympathies or those of their co-workers?
Yes.
Only in Nevada. That's great. Do we say yes, that's illegal?
Yes.
I think it's illegal. What is the name of the voter-approved constitutional amendment that guarantees minimum funding levels for K-14 education? in California, the state budget?
That was probably.
Prop 98, Prop 13.
98.
98, yep, 98. What is the difference between an independent and a dependent charter school? Each has a different teaching methodology. An independent charter school is typically nonprofit corporation. You can usually, right, we're all good testers. And they have the most language, you know, that's the one, right? Yeah, I think it's this one.
I assume we're independent based on the true.
Right.
Yeah, we're independent.
Who is typically responsible for granting the final approval of the charter school strategic plan? Parent teacher organization, charter school's principal or executive director, city council, the charter school's governing board.
Board.
The board. I think that's true.
Yay!
100%.
Ah, there you go.
Yeah.
Team.
All right. Woohoo. So cool. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
I'm supposed to name still, but any closing thoughts or questions about that? Again, I will be in email communication with you if there's any hiccups in regards to doing the same process on your own, the Brown Act training, but I did include,
Do you want to stop sharing, Mr. Fox?
yes. I included this time with you the bylaws. I don't know if you already have them. Because I thought we might have only had 3 board members here today. We still technically could conduct business, and the bylaws spells that out. I want to be able to show that to you, but this is, we'll put this same document into the board binder that we're making for you, but there's a copy of the bylaws now.
All right, moving to item 16, next scheduled board meeting, January 16th, 2024 at 3 o'clock. I will entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
This is Lindsay, I'll second.
All right, all right. We will adjourn the meeting at 5:56.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.